everybody. It's Jeff, and this is Jason Diggs, who many of you may know.
Yeah, I think when I first met you, Jeff, was probably like 17 years ago.
Wow.
After I moved to Boulder, and I was volunteering with Integral Institute and setting up microphones for Ken and Stuart Davis and whoever he was doing dialogues with. And I remember one of the first, probably employee number 5 of Integral Institute.
Is that right?
And you were, one of the leaders of that whole group. And it was a group of 30 people, and we were just out to change the world. It was so fun.
We were indeed. And I might even argue that maybe we have. I mean, there's an integral community that exists in large part globally, large part because of those 30 people working at what became the Integral Center in downtown Boulder with Ken, building the Integral Institute, doing the seminars, and people came from all over the world. Undoubtedly, some of you listening were in on those. We did those for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, those early seminars were so beautiful. And that was, for a lot of it, I was the guy behind the soundboard and recording and absorbing all of the material. And it's just been, Integral is woven into the fabric of my soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're an example of what I'm talking about here with those roots go deep into that era, and you absorbed all of that and come out a teacher, and an author. and of a book that, and I'll get to the proper introduction in a second, but just want to say that it's really great, Jason. I mean, I read a lot of books, and I have kissed a lot of frogs in the integral territory. And your book was just sort of luscious the whole way through. There's a real transmission. And so, I wanted to have you on the show to highlight it.
Yeah.
So here we are. Yeah. So a more proper introduction. Hey, folks, Jeff Salzman here. Welcome to the Daily Evolver. If you haven't already got it, my guest is an old friend with a new project. It's Jason Diggs. Hey, Jason, how you doing, man?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here, Jeff. And my heart is just warm from that pre-introduction, thinking about those early years, 2003 to 2007, and all of the different courses. And people came from all over the world, and I met people.
Exactly. And those people have created nodes, and the Rolodex, if you will, has grown. And, one of the things I get to do on the Daily Evolver is highlight how integral is showing up in the world. And that's why I wanted to highlight you and your new book. Your new book is called Conflict Equals Energy, the Transformative Practice of Authentic Relating. And authentic relating is one of the practices that came out of that integral scene. And then Robert McNaughton took over with the Integral Center, and that began this new thing. And it was really interesting to me. I participated some, but mostly, I'm the observer, so I watched. And it was this thing called circling, authentic relating.
Yeah.
And people would get together, and there would be these groups and games and parties, and this whole scene arose out of this process called authentic relating that, to me, as an evolutionary, represents the next stage in the human we space. Actually, in many ways, the human I space too. You were a big part of that. You were right in the middle of that, and no longer behind the scenes, no longer the cameraman.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that, your transformation, and what brought this book about?
Yeah. So I remember facilitating my first group in WeSpace Technologies probably 8 years ago after encountering Thomas Hubel. And he came to the Boulder Integral, it was then, called. And I just found like, whoa, this is my calling. And having found that, that thing that I really wanted to go deep into, with authentic relating and circling. In a way, you could think of it as one of the most successful applications of integral theory. Integral theory is under the hood. We don't necessarily talk about the theory so much. Another way to think of it is just what's the luscious magic of what it's like for you and I to be right here in the moment together. And the unique chemistry that you and I have, or the unique chemistry that a group of 6 or 8 people have together when we deliberately practice being in a we space together.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that in terms of understanding it, I actually love the introduction that Arjuna Arda wrote to your book, where he talks about authentic relation being other than the typical way of relating, which is strategic relating. And where you're going for an outcome or you want something to happen, while authentic relating is about showing up and seeing what happens, and allowing what happens, and nurturing what happens. And there's a whole technology around it that, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the book, so I'll just show the book. It's Conflict Equals Energy, and it has 30 tools and 12 different games and exercises, and a couple dozen sentence stems in the back of the book, and all these different resources. And they're all looking at one specific thing, which is what we found. So the Integral Center became an incubator for this practice. And, if someone came in and did it for an hour or, 5 or 6 hours, they would have a good experience. It was beautiful. It was, connection for the sake of connection itself, being seen and heard. It's just enjoyable and nourishing. But what we found when someone actually came in for, a dozen hours of practice every month for several months in a row, they actually began to grow like crazy. Their emotional and social development just took off. And that allowed, and I found this with my own self, when I first started delving into this practice and really marinating in it over time, my ability to give my gift to the world and self-actualize myself just went through the roof in about a year. I went from a place of painful social anxiety that would happen about 50% of the time I went around people. Sometimes I was comfortable, sometimes I was not, to leading groups of 30 people and really just finding my own voice and all these things. And so what I've attempted to do in the book is really just detail all of these practices so people can directly apply them to their life right away. Yeah.
And apply them to their lives, even if they're not in a group. Right? So, because, my listeners are interested in what can I get? What can I actually use? What's the transmission here? And I think what we might look at to sort of lay that out is the actual process of circling. I mean, the sort of the core process, and maybe you could describe that.
Sure. Circling in a way is advanced authentic relating. It's really, so we'll set a timer for 45 minutes or an hour, and we'll focus on one person, and we'll get radically curious about.
Okay, so this is a group of people sitting in a circle, a group of 8, 10, 12?
Yeah, it works best with 4 to 8 people.
Okay. All right, so 4 to 8 people in a circle. Go on.
Yeah, and then there's just the practice of what we call sharing impact. So I'm deeply tuning in and listening to myself in relationship to you. Like as you're talking, I'm noticing these different things arising, and then I'm sharing them with you. And we're kind of peeling back layer by layer. Often the conversation involves slowing down, but it can be quite playful as well. It can go to a lot of different places. And, sometimes it's emotional support. Sometimes it's exploration of similarities between each other. And circling is a very open-ended version of authentic relating, an advanced open-ended. And it's really suited for, I think, slightly more advanced practitioners or people who have done personal growth work or into integral. Authentic relating and what the book details is is a much more accessible version. It's like you can do authentic relating if you have 7 minutes, after a dinner party with a group of friends, and just kind of use these sentence stems. These are things that you can directly apply to conversations in your life to create more richness, either with a colleague or a family member that you haven't seen in a while or something. And the advanced authentic relating practices are about transforming conflict or difficult energy into clarity, connection, and teamwork, essentially. So the practice has really been refined. Circling started 15 years ago, but it's really been, there's probably 4 generations of teachers now in authentic relating specifically. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I love what you just said about, so you're after a party or you're with a group of friends and, you want to do some authentic relating. What do you do?
Yeah. Sometimes I think about the only thing it takes to have a deeper connection, which I think a lot of us are longing for, is one person willing to just have the courage to set the context for that to happen. Like, hey, do you want to get underneath the surface here? Do you want to explore what's underneath? Do you want to get real with each other? Asking curious questions. So we have a game called Curiosity, which is in the book, that really helps people set aside all of the normal social kind of routines that we have so we can really encounter each other soul to soul, heart to heart.
Yeah. So how would that work? Is there a particular way that goes, or? Yeah.
So we have quite a few sentence stems, which are really fun to do in a group of people. And a sentence stem is basically like everyone answers it. Everyone talks for 30 seconds to a minute and we just go around in a circle. So like, if you really knew me, you would know. And people get to share something about them, or something I don't share with everyone is. And the specific wording of the sentence stems help us just go underneath the surface with each other. And yeah. So,
and as I remember it, I went often enough to the games and did circling and so forth. A lot of it is that sort of thing where it's fun. Yeah. And it's little games that are revealing. When I think of it sort of in the bigger picture, I think of it as, that difference between strategic and authentic. Being that it's like the situation and the other person is my object of meditation.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to see where my mind wanders. I want to see where I start getting strategic and ahead of myself. I want to pay attention to the embodiment. I want to see how the sun's hitting their face. I want to see their expressions. I want to just continue to bring my attention back to this other person. And I don't think people can resist that.
Exactly. Other people experience what you're talking about as presence, it's like people notice you, like, who are you? What are you doing? And it's like you're saying, and I think another word for authentic relating is relational mindfulness. We come out of the strategic, right, wrong, what do I need to get done here, like the productive mindset, into something that's far more rich and has a lot more different dimensions online. Like you said, you can even notice the temperature of the air on your skin and the light, the way the light is hitting a person's face, and feeling your own sensations in relation to them while they're talking. And this brings in more dimensionality. And in a sense, we used to call circling intersubjective meditation.
Which is interesting. Really exactly what it is. Yeah. And I think that's right on schedule. I think evolutionarily is that we want to in fact, you mentioned this in your book, that one of the things that this is the cure for is the alienation that and loneliness that people feel in modern life. I'm not sure we were so lonely and alienated in traditional world or in the tribal worlds. But the modern world, we split from that family and we split from religion and we went to the city, and we had next door neighbors instead of family, and people are lonely. And also we got rational, so that it's hard with people that you're just meeting. And in the modern world where we have lots of relationships and people come in and out of our lives, to have the kind of depth that in some ways you're bringing back here.
Yeah.
You're bringing back a technology to get depth more quickly, with less friction, and to come and go. And I love that part of it. I do think that is evolutionary on schedule.
Yeah, it's a social technology that is an adaptation to what's happening, like you said, with modernism and now with social media. And we're being so plugged into these devices. We're 12 years into an experiment of what it does to the human brain to be connected to this smartphone thing that we carry with us everywhere and check umpteen times a day. And it really just allows us to come into like, oh, what is the human dimension here? What is the connectivity or the relational dimension between us? And it gives very specific practices of how to do that. And so the second part of the book, the middle part, which are more all of the intermediate practices, is called Games to Grow Emotional Intelligence. So because of where we've come, because of the evolution in the last 100 years of modernity, we need to deliberately practice this in a way that maybe we didn't in, 1920.
Yeah.
In 1920, if I wanted to go on a date, like I would have to knock on someone's door and talk to their father. That's a very embodied thing to do. And I would have to be relational and make an impression on someone's father to go on a date with them, or like the social dance where you're doing Lindy Hop or whatever it is, the social dance of the time, in full view of all of our peers, which is an embodied practice.
Yeah.
So this book, it's really how do we marry our embodiment and our heart, our emotional realm, and our big brains, and really have an integration of all three in our relationship. Yeah. So there is some integral underneath the hood in the book, and you saw that when you read it. Yeah.
Well, when I was reading your book, it actually came in handy because I was having an unpleasant political argument with a friend, and so joined the club in the culture war. Everybody, we're all in this, So this is really helpful because I just had. You gave me a deeper transmission of maybe something I already knew, but it was really great and it was really helpful. And that is when I find myself in this argument situation, to notice my body contraction and to, bring that online so that it doesn't run me, so that I can see it instead of be it. To feel my heart, what you just said, and the fact that I really love her and that I know she's really coming from a good place. And I actually want to get curious about that instead of, contracted and hardened and annoying.
Yes.
So thank you.
We all do it. We all get annoying when we're contracted around, the beliefs that we have. And these days we have a lot more things to be polarized around.
Yeah.
And there's, a little bit of a sadness in me about, people who agreed politically, 6 months ago are now polarized around coronavirus and how to interpret and what to do about that. It's a very strange world we find ourselves in. And so I think these practices are more important than ever. And I want to highlight one of the ones that you alluded to. And we call this connection over content. So content is all of my thoughts, all of my beliefs, all of my,
opinions.
Opinions.
Conclusions.
Yes, exactly. And it's not that those are unimportant, but prioritizing connection always over the content has the ability, it's a necessary agreement for becoming, for being connected and feeling emotionally safe with someone who you might disagree with.
Wow.
right? Prioritizing the connection, even if you have a difference of opinion, can result in deeper friendship.
Yeah.
But not if we reverse those two. If we have our content more important than the connection itself, and we're not keeping in mind, like, oh, I've known this person for 6 years. They're, connected to my, and it takes a lot of presence to keep that in mind. Like you said, being objective to our body contractions and all of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That there's a lesson in there for the culture at large to prioritize connection and citizenship and what we have in common. Maybe not prioritize it, but let's keep it online as well. Mm-hmm. And I think people are getting hip to that. See, and this is how I see, again, evolutionarily, where we have this, in modernity, we have this fracturing of attention. We have all of these options, and post-modernity with social media, it's just, there's all of this, smartphone addiction. And in some ways, I don't want to dispositionally, Jeff, don't want to see that as a wrong turn. Mm-hmm. I want to see that as, look at this wealth of information we can plug into. Mm-hmm. But it's like empty calories. And, at some point you get hip to the fact that, wait a second, I'm overweight and sluggish because I can't stop feeding this hunger that is evolutionarily millions of years old. And so is this need for connection and information and knowing and understanding. So we want that, but we find that we have become intoxicated with that at the expense of depth and connection, what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So to actually give that side of the street the attention that we now know it deserves, and to bring a new approach to human relations that, again, prioritizes connection and, embodied, maybe a little slower, more curious than critical, showing up. You talk about the dignity versus humility, where we want to hold both. So that just what that then is showing is just a bigger consciousness. Probably, actually, Jason, a bigger consciousness than I want to have or will be able to in this lifetime. But I see what's coming, and human beings have an enormous capacity that we have no idea how interesting and how much depth and span we can have. So, I want to be friendly to all of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful because the kids these days.
I know.
In a sense, their attention span is probably different than yours or mine. Like I'm Gen X, I'm 44 years old, and I feel a little bit like a bridge. I hang out with a lot of millennials, and I want to bridge the wisdom that I received from and the beauty from the me generation, your generation, all the boomers, and all of my teachers are boomers, and I want to deeply, deeply honor that. And the younger folks these days, they seem very entitled from our perspective. However, they may have capacities that I don't have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're entitled to stand on the shoulders of us. Exactly. and expect more. Yes. Exactly. Because it's, the beat goes on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's going on with this as a movement? Mm-hmm. So circling certainly big center was here in Boulder, but all over the world. I know you're working in this field, and tell us about that.
Yeah, starting about 8 years ago at the Integral Center, we were training leaders. So we had a 6-month course, and people would come to Boulder, 1 weekend a month for 6 months. And some people moved here. I remember we had one instance of the course where 3 people moved from Australia to Boulder for 6 months just to take the course. And so they've all gone out and gone back to their hometowns and taken it forward in different ways. No one can keep track of how fast the movement is expanding. Circling and authentic relating are cousins that are just grassroots fire in every direction. No one can keep track of it. When I started my podcast 3 years ago, I was like, authentic relating and circling has spread to over 30 cities around the world, because that's what I could count. Well, I'm pretty sure we've passed 90 already, where there's a regular monthly event, or there's community, or there's people practicing in their living rooms together. And so it's a decentralized movement. It's being led by, probably a dozen of us that are, prominent teachers that are making our living from these kinds of courses and training people in these skills. And then there's another 200 people who are doing it as a hobby, or like trying to start their own circling or authentic related business and leading events, and people adapting it to different niches. People have brought it into schools and into businesses, different segments of society. So yeah, the book is really an attempt to plant a flag and say, these are the practices. I really did blend awareness practices or mindfulness, integral theory, with all of the circling and authentic relating knowledge, to really create a full curriculum for developing one's emotional and social awareness.
Yeah. I think you did. I mean, I was, like I said, very impressed with both the sort of you're a beautiful writer, for one thing. Yeah. And I loved all your epigrams and how you sort of laid out the theoretical and then, the very practical, the very, the 30 exercises. It's really a very rich book. And again, it's conflict equals energy, the transformative practice of authentic relating. Mm-hmm. And if people wanted to know more, where would they look? Or if they wanted to find one of these groups, I assume they're online for some while here, while the world turns. So where can people find out more?
Yeah, my company is called Art International, Authentic Relating Training. And so we have a 2-day course called The Art of Being Human, which is now running in Europe and Bali and North America. And we also have an online version of that. That's like 6 weeks. So it's authenticrelating.co/book. So that's directly where you can buy either the electronic version or the paperback version through Amazon. And yeah, that's our website, authenticrelating.co.
Great. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jason Diggs. Mm-hmm. Really wonderful spending this time together, authentically relating.
Yeah. Warming and fun for me to talk with you, Jeff. So.
Right on. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time on the next Daily Evolver.